Dr. Jazz.
So happy we could find the time to do that. You know,
me too. Me too. Thank you for joining us together.
Yeah,
It's
I mean,
great to meet you.
it's you know, obviously one of the first records I bought was Solomon's Daughter with you, and then I started to explore what you did, you know, and I'm a huge fan of Drew Grass. Also, I played with him, and then I checked out the records in the House of My Fathers and all that stuff, and Kairos and
Wow, that's old stuff.
That's old stuff, but you know, I'll just jump in, and I want to ask you about the new stuff, which is the Emancipation Suite, and I listened to it a lot on Bandcamp, and it's just like this amazing energy that's going on there. You just, you know, you dive in the water, and it's just like wow. And how did that one come about? You know,
that particular album is it's actually one piece of music that the four of us improvised without any predetermination.
Oh, okay.
This is, I guess, in March of 2020.
Okay, so kind of
right before the lockdown, as we call it. Right before, like a week before. So we had the band Scatter the Atoms That Remain, you know, my band with Davis Whitfield primarily, and at the time Otto Gardner on bass, and then we were trying different saxophone players, and we started playing with a young man named Emilio Modeste. And so, and we had a studio in Hoboken, New Jersey, which is directly across from Greenwich Village, you know, except you don't swim in the Hudson. No. That would be great, but it's not there. And so the studio is, you know, was a high. And, you know, it's our own kind of live recording room. And so we would go there pretty much every day when we were all in town. And you know, that was our woodshed. But we were also recording album quality at the same time. So it was a really situation, really fantastic. And which has disappeared because of the pandemic. But so Emilio was there that day, and as we did every day, you just basically press go, and somebody starts playing. So that's what that is, and the only physical release is on LP. So we had to find a place because there's only 15 minutes, let's say, aside on a high-res LP, so we had to cut it somewhere, and it actually worked out perfectly. So it wasn't named, and it wasn't necessarily a suite pre-planned, but it turned out to be this ebb and flow with the first section, and then a more kind of like pensive pastoral section, and then the the conclusion, which turned out to be more, I guess, what we'd call, not candomblé, but, Afro-Latin or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
So it just worked out like that. And then there was a good place to cut it. So but it's one contiguous piece. So the digital files are, it's just this one,
25
this
minutes,
one. Yeah, whatever. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Did you do that often with this band? I mean, because like the previous one was like quite composed, right? It was 10 compositions, I think. And
yes and no.
Oh, okay.
Yes and no. I think that, for example, if I took, and this is kind of one of the processes that we're using right now, we're listening back to the past few tours and listening to the improvisations and going, where are the songs in this, because that will probably reveal the next step. So the backstory in terms of my understanding of how this works, of how music, the magic of music, and life in general, is I believe more and more, I always have, but my life is revealing the truth of this, that the greatest experiences are, I guess you'd say spontaneous, or in the West we say, comes from trusting your intuition.
Yeah.
Or, what do the Zen people say? First thought, best thought. Yeah. Or so I kind of think, and of course you can argue with so-called classical musicians, or even nowadays most jazz musicians, that no, you have to work on a piece and rework it, and that might be so. Maybe you can improve things that way, maybe not, I don't know, but the actual inspiration for the kernel, the actual spark, no, that comes from, so that should be obvious, because the whole purpose of music, as far as I can tell, is that it transcends conceptual fabrication. It reaches people right in the heart without, and so our process of evolution as musicians is to try to take away whatever is between the inspiration and the expiration, and so that the musician and the listener, the whole situation doesn't have to decipher.
Yeah,
it reaches you energetically, organically. Afterwards, you can think about it and go, "Wow, that was really deep or beautiful," or But the initial experience is non-conceptual. I think that's what's so amazing about music. That's the magic of music to me. Yeah. There's my answer.
No, it makes sense, because you put on Coltrane, or I don't know, when I hear your music, I always think of Love Supreme and those amazing albums, like, just because it's like, it's so pure in a sense. I don't know if pure is the right word, but it's like,
I think it's a good word.
It's there, it's not like you have to decipher whether it's an 11 or 13 or whatever.
It reaches you on a,
I like that.
It changes you. It opens you up, it's an energetic experience, rather than, I find that's kind of what I find most difficult, especially, more and more. Maybe it's going to change. I think everything comes around, but more and more, people are relying on the intellectual, the cleverness.
Yeah.
And that's not my definition of great.
Yeah.
My definition of great is soul, is heart, is transcension. It don't mean a thing if it ain't got that love supreme.
No, it makes sense. It's true. It's
like Bob. Bob has that vibe about him, about his whole being. That's what he's devoted to. And the people that I love, the people that I love people that are confused too. We all are, and I love people that are trapped in their explanation of things. But the people that I follow, and the ones that I trust to learn the most from directly, are the ones that are following their heart.
Yeah, that's so important. It's hard. For me, it was like when playing with Bob now, like, we played some of his tunes, and he was like, "Man, you play with your heart," while he was playing. Like, come on, sing, come on, man. I'm a younger guy. I'm still learning, man. And like,
we all are.
And
we all are. I think that's one of the most amazing things about our universe, as musicians, is that everybody, I can remember meeting, finally meeting older legends that I grew up like, revering. And the most remarkable thing, once I got over my, wide-eyedness, was how devoted they were to evolving and growing still. And they had learned how to grow more and more and more. And that was like, wow, very, very inspiring, very empowering.
Yeah, it's amazing, like how much they believe in that, I mean, it's just like, that's my goal, and that's why they play so good, all of these guys, like I mean, including you, when I listen to it, it's like just, but yeah, it takes time. It's like wine or something. You have to mature, you have to not think too much, but yeah, that's why it's a nice thing.
You have to let
so.
Yeah, life changes you, if you're open to feeling, and not spending your energy trying to run away or ignore the profundity of your experience, the profound, like, wow, this is deep. Then it changes you, and you have more opportunity to give. That's what I'm trying to learn. Yeah.
Me too. More and more lately. I've done the whole odd meters and composing, and now more and more I'm like into simple melodies and just being. I feel it's more to express for me. It's just like, but it's a struggle. I'm learning. It's a fight, but and just to let it go.
Well, there's a certain amount of struggle in life, it's not easy.
It's not easy. Yeah. But, Franklin, I wanted to ask you, you mentioned your heroes, and I know you come from Canada, right? And
I was born and grew up in Montreal, and then started, left when I was a teenager, started traveling. And
I wanted to ask you, when was this moment for you that, as a young teenager, I guess, hearing drums, or especially jazz drums, or not necessarily jazz drums, that you decided, like, was there a record or a concert that kind of?
Well, I grew up at a time and in a household, very fortunately, that allowed for a lot of possibilities. So I don't think, looking back now, even though I thought, as every kid and teenager thinks, my parents are controlling me and stuff, but actually they really let me do pretty much whatever I was interested in. My father really loved New Orleans music and big band music, and also there was quite a bit of like European orchestral chamber music, what people call classical music, which, if you think about the word classical, it doesn't really make sense. Exactly. But and so I grew up with a lot of music around me. No professional musicians. I have a cousin who's an older cousin who's a well-known songwriter, and my grandfather that I was very close with. We say in Yiddish, my Zeta. That's I was very, very close with him, and he was a dancer when he was young. He was a professional dancer, like Charleston and Jitterbug then and stuff, and so he was really into music and stuff, but we didn't listen together. But I listened with my father, and I was very in love with certain records. And when I was very young, my two favorite records were, there was a Kid Ory record. Kid Ory's was a trombone player with Minor Hall on drums, and so New Orleans music. And there's one song called Mahogany Hall Stomp. I just listened to it over and over. I didn't see myself as obsessive, but I realized that I was, and probably still am. And that actually helped me in developing as a musician, but probably made everybody else crazy. But so I listened to that over. And then there was a Fats Waller record, a Fats Waller song called Don't Let It Bother You. Which musically I loved it, and the message of it blew me away because I was a little kid and I was kind of a serious little kid. And the whole song is like, don't let it bother you when things, go wrong, turn that frown upside down, but he was just his phrasing. I mean, if you listen to Fats Waller, you'll know immediately what I mean. His playing and everything, the vibe of it. And so one thing similar between those two songs that I only understood many, many, many years later was the size of the beat, the pulse, the breadth of the pulse, and the depth of the phrasing. And so then I, naturally, if you're into it, you listen to stuff that is in line with that, and your palate grows. So I got very into Baby Dodds and like those Big Sig Catlett for sure, and and certainly Gene Krupa, all this big beat stuff.
Yeah, like
it really rocked me. I really felt it. So that was my. Also with the orchestral stuff and the chamber stuff, it was the size of it that really. It was this feeling of awe, that I never really let go of. That was like the sign for me of what this was about. And so by the time I was like 12 years old, I was going to play drums. Then there was a few years of like, well, should it be this or that? And then by the time I was 15, that was it. And 15 years old, I'd listened to a lot of stuff. I have one sibling, a brother who's 4 years older, who, of course, if I was 12, he was 16, which is significant. If I was 14, he was 18. So buying all these records. And this is in like the late 60s and 70s. So you can imagine what I was listening to.
Yeah.
So everything, like we had all the Frank Zappa records, and all the McCoy Tyner records.
Oh.
And but when I was 15, I had a friend whose dad was a music teacher, and my friend was like a multi-instrumentalist and could play. We thought he could play everything. And we were like, in his attic or basement or something. And he said, "Man, you got to hear this." And he put on this record, and I didn't know what was going on. It just sounded like everything was happening at once, but I knew this is it. This is as far as it gets, or as far as it got. And that was a record called Sunship.
Oh yeah,
sure. John Coltrane Quartet, and that really really changed me in a few ways. It really worked on me. I think subconsciously in a few different ways. I think one of the ways is that so I can't really understand what's going on, and I can't really hear it like I'm used to hearing music with these layers and interactions and stuff. It was just like, but how it affected me was so powerful that oh my God. So there's a much I don't know what word to use, metaphysics, primordial, and it wasn't jazz to me. It was like something much more ancient and deep. I don't know how I described it, but it really and then I guess I knew that, and I was kind of like a little bit awkward, maybe. I wasn't exactly the most socially engaged person in high school or anything like that. I was like going to all the parties and stuff. I was kind of maybe a nerd, or I don't know.
Yeah.
And I said to myself, I think, well, if you're going to do something like this, you have to devote yourself completely to it, and it's not going to be easy. So then it was just like, I always thought that you had to choose in life to do the thing that moved you the most. That's what you were like supposed to do. Oh yeah. Well,
Yeah, makes
So
sense in a way. Yeah,
that's what I've been trying to do.
yeah. Like, what about it then in Montreal? Like, how was you started playing drums then, obviously learning.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Were there musicians there back there? I mean, I know some Canadian jazz musicians, like, but how was like early 70s,
I mean, there's
mid 70s?
where Samo, where are you from? Like, where did you grow up?
Oh, Slovenia, Europe.
Okay, and like a big city or a town?
No, like 150,000. So
okay, I don't even need to ask you. Of course, there was musicians.
I mean,
there.
like musicians that you actually kind of that you wanted to play with,
no,
like that, that's what I mean.
Yeah,
like this.
Yeah. So Montreal was always part of the East Coast touring scene.
Oh, okay.
From
Sure.
back in the 30s and 40s.
Okay.
So, and one of the reasons why it was so popular with jazz musicians was even during Prohibition and afterwards, Montreal was a very wide open city. You could basically, it was an easy place to party. It was very kind of European in terms of its appreciation. Less American.
Yeah.
And easier to a certain degree with racism, less restrictive. Yeah. And the strip bars were naked girls instead of just topless. It was like a more open kind of place. So people dug it, whether it was from way before Ellington and all through. So I grew up like my friends. I grew up like going to hear, when I was old enough, like going to hear Dexter and Elvin's band and on and on and on. Mingus. I met these people, So it was it was a relatively safe place, big city, but it's pretty safe. Yeah. So it was a kind of, and like 6-hour drive from New York. Yeah. So pretty cool place to grow up, it turns out. So I grew up with, by the time I was 14, 15, even before, but let's say 14, 15, I was playing with guys that like wanted to play jazz, whatever they thought that was, whether it was Song for My Father or, or Scrapple from the Apple, but maybe those eras, from the 50s to the 70s or something. So I was fortunate in that way. And of course, like any big city, there was some good musicians. And there was a couple of guys that were, a few guys that I thought were quite exceptional. And so I got a chance to be in the shed with all through my life. I kind of have had very fortunate to have like one person that I would really be in the shed with in different periods and develop a lot that way. So I think that I've developed a lot on my own, especially once that I recognized that I should record everything I'm playing. I remember seeing a picture of John Coltrane with a little battery-operated reel-to-reel tape recorder tied to his back, and he would walk around the house. I heard stories eventually from people that played with him that he would walk around and he recorded everything and listened. So I pretty early on made my practice regime. I hope my answers aren't too long.
Oh no, man, please. It's
okay.
That's why we're doing this. Okay. I want to hear your story.
Because I start to think about this.
No, please. That's why we're.
So, okay. I'm happy that I recognize that my practice should be half playing and half listening back to what I played. And then, is this what I wanted it to feel like? How would I change it if I wanted it to feel like more like what I want it to feel like? And it, could be so different than what I thought. Like, what I thought would get a certain effect could be very wrong or very different. Very interesting. So that's and between that and working with another person, at least one other person, but especially one-on-one, working on stuff. And it was only much, much later that I heard, stories about Train and, whoever would, whether it's, Jimmy Heath or whoever, we'd play scales. Of course, when they played scales, I don't think it was da 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 da. It wasn't exactly playing scales, but they played scales. Yeah. How could you play incredibly profound music by, just playing the C major scale? Yeah. So that's how I evolved. And so, yeah, there was people around that were very devoted to their own evolution in jazz, and and we would shed and play gigs and stuff like that. Yeah. And and then by the time I was like 17, 17 and a half, I guess, or something like that, 18, I left kind of like college in music. I left to go on the road with like a funk band.
Oh, wow.
In the States. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And my 13-year-old daughter was joking with me yesterday because she looks back and listens to this old stuff, and she really liked this song. There was this song, Play That Funky Music, White Boy.
Yeah, well, sorry.
So we used to play. I was in a trio with a couple of black guys playing in some pretty tough black neighborhoods in the eastern seaboard, and we used to play that song, and then at a certain point they would like turn around and point at me, So I think back now and it's kind of scary, but it was very cool at the time, Oh. So yeah, that's what I did. But of course, that's not what I really wanted to do, but it was great. I wanted to improvise.
Yeah.
Which is what I thought, kind of, even with all the writing of like the bebop and post bop and stuff. I always thought that what this was about was improvising. What made it really stuff, like I said, it's the spontaneity, the real spark, and that you don't know what's going to happen. Yeah. And and that's what I felt from the beginning with the New Orleans music, and that's what really moved me. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense. No. It's it was then New York the next logical step. I mean, Montreal, I guess, quality again. You talked about this more European approach, more open city. Montreal,
it wasn't a European approach. Yeah, it wasn't a European approach to improvising at all. There was no. There wasn't anything like that.
Yeah. I mean,
this might be right? This might be controversial. Well, I want to go in that direction for a second because I find it interesting and I like being controversial, which is, I think, comes out in the music maybe. But so when I was a teenager, or when I was like younger, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, there wasn't really so much European improvised music, except for, Bela Bartok, or, whatever, and all this incredible folk music, the original stuff. But there wasn't like this European art improvisation, especially identified as its own thing.
Yeah.
Right. So what there was a bunch of guys that had heard jazz music and wanted to play jazz music, whatever they thought that was. And then, when I was, I guess, I don't know, 16, 17, and ECM started. And, there was Abercrombie and DeJohnette, which were American musicians who basically held John Coltrane on the top of their head. And, like everybody, and like Jan Gabarek, everybody thought that was the, oh my God, so I want to do my, I want to learn how, right. So, but then, I remember, it's just my take on it from my little vantage point. It was this whole process with ECM and this very airy kind of sound, and focusing more on, instead of there being this huge up and down range to the music, it became more kind of like linear,
Yeah.
And with the way, like, we can talk about drummers and all that, but you know, so I grew up listening to that stuff and really digging it, and at first not seeing the tension between that way of playing, which I can identify now as maybe more straight eighths, and you know, we can talk technically about it as musicians, but and the more round depth up and down. So yeah, it's been an interesting museo-political evolution, where at a certain point, when I first moved to New York to stay there for the 20 years that I lived in New York, actually.
When was that?
It was like, huh?
When did you move? At what time? You're like mid 80s?
I guess the 80s, something like that. Yeah. I'd have to, yeah. And that's when the whole neo jazz, I don't know what to call it, but that became very political inside of, where there was like the downtown knitting factory scene, or this is after some years, and then there was the uptown, you know, Wynton Marsalis scene. And then there was like, right. So, but by then there was already this, you know, European tradition of you know, Mangelsdorf and then Breutzmann and right, all that stuff. British, right. And but also the more chamber, you know, that was more the skronky maybe, or, you know, energy thing. So we can talk forever about that and what I think happened. Like I can see, okay, so, and I see it very much like, you know, in my very little view of trying to figure out things, then I abandon it and just go back to practicing. But my little view is, so imagine like 1967 or 66, before Train died. There was like Miles's band playing like this rock out stuff, which was, you know, and like Bitches Brew stuff. I mean, before, you know, and then there was like Train, you know, in like 65, you know, Transition and Sunship, and then wanting to go further, and that band falling apart, and him not, in my view, you know, him going further, but with who? It kind of didn't matter with who, which is pretty amazing. For him, it was just like, no, it's like almost like His Holiness Dalai Lama. Like, no, it doesn't matter who is next to me. You know, I love them all. You know, it doesn't matter if I'm talking about the highest tantra or talking about loving kindness. It's all the same. Right. So I don't see Coltrane quite on that level, but yeah, because Dalai Lama doesn't need a horn, right? But you know, same. Like, I'm just doing my thing, and the energy is free for all, you know. And yet, you know, in my estimation, nobody had gotten to the level that, you know, McCoy and Elvin and Jimmy Garrison had gotten to, in my estimation. But that, like all things, fell apart, like all things. Sure. So then what do people like you and me and everybody else, what are you going to do? You can either go, yeah, well, I don't really like that. Or you can go, like everybody, like, this is so incredible, but I can't do that. What am I going to do? And then so people had to decide, you know, some people went into going, thinking that was the vehicle. Some people went into analyzing everything and making it, you know, almost like fusion, you know. And so I think it was very difficult, but some people never gave up on finding their own way to, because I think the important thing for me is that I never identified what people got to, whether it was Bartok or Train or Bayaka people from the rainforest, or no matter, you know, I never viewed it as theirs. It's ours. I mean, we're one. It's not like, you know, I don't even, you know, it's interesting where you come from, but it makes ultimately no difference. It's different, and that's beautiful, but it doesn't matter. It's just, we are, man. Boop. like a bubble. Right. So I never felt like that I wasn't privy to that.
Yeah.
And I never felt that by me loving it and diving into it, I was appropriating somebody else's culture. Nobody owns this stuff. It's like, you know, it's like the native people everywhere, especially, you know, I know about America, but everywhere, it's like, we don't own the land.
Yeah.
We don't own this. We coexist. We're all, you know, right. So the music is like that, you know, nobody can really ultimately own music.
It's nicely put, yeah.
It's like trying to erect a wall between Mexico and the United States, you know. It's like the line is artificial to start with.
Yeah, sure. If you look at the planet from above, there are no borders.
Right. It's ridiculous. Yeah. Right. So that helped me not kind of go, oh no, I can't do that.
Yeah.
But I also knew that I'd have to find my own way. You can't do it how somebody else did it. You can't get to it using somebody else's mind.
Yeah.
Or body, you know. You have to find your own way, you know. Yeah.
In this finding your own way, you know, when I look at what you've done in, let's say, this early mid-90s, these are some of really amazing records. I mean, like, if you put it there, for me, they're uncategorizable. Like, you know, a lot of music, if I listen to Chick Corea from the 80s, with all respect, you know, it's from, you know, Electric Band 85. It's beautiful, but it's just, you know, or some Windham Hill records or Fusion or blah, blah, blah. And when I put your record on, like in the House of Our Fathers or Kairos or Solomon's Daughter, it's hard to categorize. It could be 69, it could be 2021, it's 93, because it's not bound in time. And but I wanted to ask you, like, in this finding your voice and your way, how did you start forming these groups? And incredible players, you know, I mean, like Sam Rivers or, you know, John Stubblefield or
John. Yeah, wow.
You know, I love that guy. He's one of the most underrated players. But like, how did
and boy, he did so much. And people, if you started, you know, in the days of the LP, if you like turned it over and read all your LPs, oh, there's John Stubblefield. Oh, McCoy time. Yeah. You know, a lot of what's happened, it seemed, when I think about it, because I never really thought about this quite like you're asking it, but it comes back to like having close relationships with individual people that I was kind of in the shed with, and we develop, and then you know, maybe I would say, well, what can we do with this? Or now that I'm learning how to play like that, like I'm trying to, who can I do it with? And like for the earliest records, I didn't really know how to vehicular, like make a vehicle for what I was hearing. So I wrote a lot of music. Almost through composed a lot of stuff, thinking that I could create this big thing that I was hearing, and that it would kind of have its own life, which I was partially wrong about, but it was a great learning experience. And so at that point, I needed to find, at that point, brass players that I can form kind of brass quartet with that could play this stuff. And so that was a bit different, because I just made a list of you know, all the best chamber trumpet players in the world, basically, is what I did. As pompous as that sounds, but that's kind of how I proceeded in my life. You know, which I think can be seen as obnoxious to certain people, that I just go ahead and say, well, yeah, let me try to, you know, play with the best people I can possibly get, you know. but that's how I tried to proceed. I thought it would be the best idea. So, and then I quickly realized that there's this one guy named Chris Gecker, who's a real preeminent trumpet player in the world of so I found his phone number, called him up, and told him what I was trying to do, and he said, well, turned out to be a really wonderful person and very open musically and looking for challenges and looking for things out of the ordinary. And so we became very close friends. And so he put together this like a couple of iterations of incredible brass players, some of the best. So that's how that happened. Sometimes I would just call up people. I'd hear people and just talk to them and say, will you check this out? But for me, it was always me trying to do my thing, which I think it turns out to be quite different than most people who are trying to get into other people's bands or even collaborate. I felt that I knew what I was trying to do, but didn't know how to do it. And so I had to try to do it. And that's how I've proceeded. Which I think has created a certain amount in my little world, certain amount of controversy, but also I think a certain amount of opportunity. Yeah. And but then for example, like my association with Pharaoh Sanders came about because I was working very closely with this piano player, John Esposito. Living up in the Woodstock area. And I sought him out because when I was living in New York, the first couple of years, people were talking about this guy living out in the Catskills who was really into finding his own way to go further and was real serious about the shed, about developing. And a few people said maybe you guys would really be cool playing together. And then they would talk about how he came up with this kind of legendary horn player that died way too young named Arthur Rames, and who was kind of a legend in New York, and who died in his 20s, but incredibly gifted person. And how they were playing this very kind of energetic spiritual vibe, and I should get with John. So we became very close friends and were in the shed together for quite a long time, and I developed some of what I was trying to do on the drums. And then, hey John, who can we do this with, and he said, man, I don't really know so many horn players that can, wow, you're putting out so much sound, and vibe, he said, the only person I can think of is Pharaoh Sanders, and I don't even know what he's playing like now, if it's just screeching or if he's just wanting to be on television and he's playing, my favorite things. But I don't know how, I don't remember how I got a phone number for Pharaoh, but I called him up. So, and then we made a tiny, we made this thing, so same with Sam, after doing that album with Pharaoh, it made things a lot easier in terms of contacting people. Yeah. So, and that's how I proceeded. My present very close association with the musical director of Scatter the Atoms That Remain is Davis Whitfield, the wonderful piano player. And I think Davis is a genius. I think that's going to come out, a lot of what people have to offer only really comes to fruition, comes to the surface when they break the gravity of what's holding them back. And as much as people love the scene and being appreciated because they're fulfilling a role, greatness comes from breaking free of that, and that's very difficult. That can be quite painful. So and Davis is incredible. So Davis appeared in my mind stream because an old friend of mine from Montreal, who's some years older than me, one of the first guys I played with there, jazz musician, real jazz musician. He had been living in New York for years and years. And about 6 years ago, he called me up or something. And he said, man, and we weren't even so much in touch. And he said, for what you're trying to do, you should check out this young guy, Davis Whitfield, this piano player. You should, I don't know why he even took the time to, but he did. And so, yeah, I checked out Davis Whitfield, and we've been very closely associated ever since. And I feel we're doing I'm going further and further and closer to what I set out to do. And that in great part at this point has to do with Davis. And we're both very committed to what we're doing. So, and the other people we're playing with doing these things. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you, like you mentioned Sam and Pharaoh and all these guys.
Yeah.
Did you also do concerts with these quartets or groups, like with Sam or?
Not with Sam or Pharaoh,
Okay.
When with Pharaoh, there was a lot of plans to do a lot of stuff, including when the record called Solomon's Daughter originally came out. There was more reaction to it, more positive reaction to it than I had even hoped for. And it was kind of startling, and Rolling Stone magazine was writing about it. Entertainment Weekly.
Yeah.
I don't know in Europe if you know that magazine, but it's like what housewives used to be housewives buy at the checkout counter, in the grocery store. It's like talking about this, not avant-garde, but this album with Pharoah Sanders. So there was a lot of reaction to it, and there was opportunities. And so I thought that, me and Pharaoh, man, this is my pompous, which some people I think is obnoxious, and I can accept that. It's also kind of naive, but it's also kind of wonderful in terms of really wanting to do beautiful things. Yeah. So I thought, now we're going to develop this thing. We're going to take the next step, man. Me and Pharaoh. Yeah. Which was a little bit naive, but and so we had the record label at the time that I produced this recording, and then this, there was some interest from different labels when they started hearing it to put it out. And the record label that finally worked out a deal with me called Evidence was going to put on this really nice release concert. And it was originally going to be at this large venue in New York called SOBs. And Pharaoh was going to do it. And then he pulled out at the last minute. And I never really knew why. Pharaoh and I mean, he passed on some a couple of months ago. And but we had always had a good relationship, but this was difficult. This was, and I didn't really understand. And so, but at the time, Joe Lovano had become like the most famous saxophone player in the world at that moment, and so I didn't know him, but I thought he's really good. And so I called Joe up and he said, "Oh, hi, Franklin. Yeah, wow, I really love your record." I said, "Well, I have this release concert coming up for it, and would you?" And so, of course, he did it, and that was it turned out to be a place called Sweet Basil's.
Yeah, sure.
And that a very special night, and that was very cool. But so that didn't happen, and for a long time, I found that was a real awakening for me. We say in English, a rude awakening, like when somebody pours cold water on you. This business. Yeah, that's why they say it's wow. Because it just seemed like obvious, like what we did. Pharaoh thought it was, he said, "Man, you made a great record. You sound like 10 drummers, man." And I said, Pharaoh, it's because of you. And it was all love and beautiful, and he really felt strong about it,
Yeah.
But of course, it doesn't mean he necessarily wants to walk down that path with me, which is fine now, but it was a real growth experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. And part of the reason why, then I did that record Kairos with Sam and so on and so forth. And then after that, I became so disenchanted and who am I going to do this with? How am I going to really, because I always felt my mission was to go as far as I could, kind of like no matter what.
Yeah.
Which is a bit strange, but and so how am I going to do this? And I felt that, well, I need to grow. I can't make people or change the world. I need to change myself. I need to become more of what this music is supposed to be, which is ultimately about love and openness and bravery and heart so I became more and more involved in the spiritual practice that I had been pursuing since I was a teenager, and ended up spending the next few years very much focused on that and following that, spending a lot of time off on retreats in various places, some very remote places and stuff, and wonderful opportunity, wonderful period of my life, and really, really helped me, just like this rude awakening of the jazz business, kind of like this was a very logical next step.
Yeah.
And so as much as I had wished that, I was going to start playing all the festivals and all the gigs with Pharaoh, this is it. And I really thought, this is where I belong. This is what it's. Nope. So here we are now. And now I can look back and kind of like be very thankful for whatever happened, because I think, a little bit closer to the real deal, that heart, a little bit closer to it. And I think that the adversity and difficulties, and also subsequent humility of realizing that I was the source of what I was experiencing, it's been very helpful, and it continues. It's a path,
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, interesting. Yeah.
Still looking for who to do this with, and have wonderful people to work with. We've been doing so. As I said, the core of this band, Scatter the Atoms That Remain, is Davis, Whitfield, and me, and really, I feel taking great strides. Really, really getting at something further, and we get to play with incredible people. We've just done some concerts with George Garzone on saxophone, and we even did some stuff with Gene Perla on bass.
Oh, really?
It's really Gene and George together.
Oh, man,
which was pretty cool. And so we're getting a lot of great opportunities, and perhaps things will evolve where the band will be a quartet again or something else, but for the time being, it's this core of me and Davis and these wonderful people that we're working with. We've actually begun working with a wonderful guy that I've known since the album with Pharaoh came out many years ago, a guy named Jason O'Lane, who's now he's the vice president of I guess it's programming, concerts and touring at Lincoln Center, Jazz at Lincoln Center. And so he's been a fan since way back then. It's kind of he's been in the jazz business, first of all writing for the radio, paper called the Gavin Report, then Booking Yoshi's, and then A&R at Verve, and now he's been at Lincoln Center, many other things, but been at Lincoln Center for quite a while. So he's working with us, kind of develop our programming and our reach, because we're still trying to really get out there and magnetize enough of an audience so that we can present this the way we want to. So there's good things about to happen, and we're excited about that.
Beautiful. I'm looking forward to hear some new stuff always by you. It's like I don't know, it's nice that you have your own way that's unique in the world of music, the business of music. But I wanted to ask you about one thing, if there's more of that. On your YouTube channel, there's like an impro or duo of you and Abercrombie. And I'm such a huge fan of his, been for years. And like, how did this one happen? And what's your story with him, actually? I mean,
first of all, it's surprising, that you went to YouTube. We have not put any effort into YouTube. And so people don't even know about any of the stuff there. So, Instagram, Scatter the Atoms, I guess just Scatter the Atoms. On Instagram is where we're posting videos and stuff. So at a certain point, still same quest, in my early 20s, I guess, or mid 20s, I started reaching out, specifically doing this thing of contacting individual musicians that I admired greatly, to learn from them, play with them, and try to do my thing, which was, not necessarily the way that other people around me were doing things, like, so around the same time, two opportunities came up. One was to associate with a percussionist named Don Elias.
Oh, really? Wow.
Well, I knew from Bitches Brew with Miles, and subsequently all kinds of things, all kinds of things. Miles's bands. And,
one of the greats. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, certainly. And so that was very, very changing experience for me. We were pretty tight for a period of time, and played a lot, and then recorded a set of duets.
Wow.
Which never got released, and I still have it. And
come on.
pretty cool. But I was young, and I felt awkward about it, but maybe, I don't know, maybe sometime in the future I'll release it. I don't know. But it was a great time, and he is a very generous person, and very illuminating. Learned a lot from him. And also, I told you that when I was a teenager, that's when the whole ECM thing started happening, and John Abercrombie and Jack DeJohnette and Miroslav Vitus and Jan Hammer, and I don't know, there's a whole scene, right, that I really dug. It was different, but it was also, kind of hippie, like smart guys who were really like not scared to, take it out there. Yeah. And energy was a big part of it. Even if you listen to the first Weather Report stuff, that was kind of even like that. The first stuff. So, it was like, it was the same, people talk about the loft scene in New York. This was all associated. I don't know if people know that, but it was all one thing, right? It was only after that people said, oh, there's the European thing, there's this. That wasn't like that. So I was really into that stuff when I was 16, 17. And so there I was 10 years or 5, 8 years later. And I got in touch with Abercrombie, and I said, I want to do something with you. And he said, why don't you come over and let's, listen and talk. He's if anybody that knew John, knows that he was a very, very wonderful guy, very generous, also very open and very crazy, wonderful guy. So, we got together and we recorded an album's worth of duets.
Wow.
And I think the piece you're talking about, I think we ended up calling it Concierge des Rêves.
Exactly.
Janitor of Dreams, basically. And the way we came up with the title was we didn't know what after we had recorded and we were listening again in his loft. And we're sitting around listening over brunch or breakfast or something, I remember, and we didn't know what to call stuff. So he said, let's look at the classified ads in the Village Voice. This newspaper was still available, right? So we looked through like the classified ads of jobs available, and it said like, for some fancy building, concierge, you could be the doorman or something, So I said, yeah, man, how about like concierge des rêves? Like, doorman or janitor, superintendent of dreams. She said, yeah, that's good. Yeah, okay. Like most songs, that's how titles come about, it's just, so that's, and I didn't, John thought that it was good and he was happy to put it out that, but I felt like, no, man, I'm not playing good enough. And I think that's I felt like that a lot in my life, which is okay. And also, I mean, I'm still unsure of how much one should sit on things if they don't feel they're quite right. Even if other people think it's good. I would rather not. Yeah. So because I'm not like ecstatic about everything that I've released. So,
sure.
For example, like there's this, I don't know if, there's a recording that I was part of way back with, I don't know. I'm pretty sure it's going to come out because I made arrangements to give it to the other person that put the project together. I've said all these years, I don't want to release it. But finally he was saying to me, look, man, it's like all these years and you're like, you're keeping me. I love it. And I want it to be out there. And it's with like, pretty famous musicians on, and so like, what do? I don't really want it to come out, but it's kind of not fair if I, so it's interesting, it brings up kind of ethical questions that I don't have answers for yet. I don't know.
But that's where you were at that certain stage in your evolution
but maybe,
as a person and musician. No?
Yeah, but maybe it wasn't so good. Like, in other words, like even the first couple of records I did, I wasn't really, I don't think they're very good.
Interesting.
My part in it, I don't mean the other people, really not. My part in it, it's not, I don't, so. But
that's a question, Franklin. Sorry, like you think that, let's say, if you ask Coltrane, that he was,
that's a hard question, man.
like, but you know what I mean, like, or any of these guys who I think were striving to constantly involve, and usually when you talk to these guys, they're always like, I'm not really happy with how I play. I need
Elvin always said he hated listening to himself,
but
all I hear is
records,
what I did wrong. All I hear is what I did wrong.
So if those guys didn't release those records, man, we would have been shortened for some amazing music, if just
but
I get your point.
Actually, it brings up a very interesting point, because so now there's like, the complete Sonship Sessions.
Yeah.
Complete Love Supreme. And you go, wow, this is incredible. Oh my God, he played the same thing over and over again, like the Revelations, or listen to that. That was a tag that they put on, like, wow. Okay, but maybe he didn't want to release that.
That's a different story, yeah.
I mean, who, on the one hand, nobody owns the music. On the other hand, the artist has to be the steward, the shepherd of, So it's interesting, interesting question that I don't have the answer for.
No, but I get your point. But like, let's say for me as an outsider, like just a fan of music, not even a musician, let's say, but just as a fan of music, for me to be able to hear, let's say, this album with you and Abercrombie, man, right. That would be, this like amazing, right? that's why I'm always, when I hear people like yourself, saying, we have this, I have this album somewhere with this and this. I'm like, man, this is an opportunity. I mean, to hear him and hear you and like, that's, as a fan of music.
I mean, and there's the other thing of, like if somebody asks you, well, what's your favorite thing that you did? It's what I'm going to do tonight. What I'm going to, I'm going to play better tonight than I ever did in my life. And that you have to have that attitude. And it's true. I mean, I'm playing a lot better now than I was last year.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. And we strive for that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. Like I said at the beginning of our talk, the thing that impressed me the most about, older musicians that I felt were legendary, meeting them, was how serious they were about their own evolution still. Wow. How inspiring. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Cool.
Dr. Jazz.